The birth of the Roman Republic came about as the result of a public outcry against the sexual assault of a woman. Its ancient origins date back some 249 years after the actual founding of the city of Rome, when in the year 509 BC, a noble woman named Lucretia committed suicide. The son of Rome's king, holding a dagger to her throat, had violated the noble woman. Before plunging the same dagger into her own heart, a humiliated Lucretia disclosed to her husband, Lucius Collatinus, that his kin, Lucius Tarquinius, son of King Tarquinius Superbus, had molested her. As her husband, Collatinus, and her cousin, Lucius Junius Brutus, presented her dead and defiled body to the enraged masses, a nail was driven into the coffin of the monarchy, and a republic was begotten. But that was only the beginning. Etruscan ambassadors soon paid a visit to Rome. Before the Senate, these ambassadors formally requested that the Senate return plundered goods that had been seized from the king and his family during the violent coup. But the ambassadors also wasted no opportunity as the Senate debated whether or not to return these confiscated items, secretly sounding out those senators who had been known to be sympathetic to the Tarquinius family. Thus, a plot was born. Members of the Aquilii and Vitellii houses swore sacred oaths, legally solidified with horrific human sacrifice, pledging to help King Tarquinius Superbus retake the city of Rome. Unbeknownst to these conspirators, a slave in the Vitellius house had witnessed this oath of blood and had quickly fled to the Senate. There, he revealed what he had seen. His freedom and a large sum of gold later accompanied his humble contribution to the budding republic. Under the law of nations that existed between Rome and her Etruscan allies, the cunning ambassadors were expelled from the city. But those Romans involved in the plot to return their city to the hands of the tyrannical Tarquinius family had unwittingly put their names in writing. Having provided the Senate's sure proof of their guilt, all involved were sentenced to death. As Rome's first consuls, Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucius Collatinus sat together in judgment as the traitors were brought before them for execution. And there, amidst the guilty, stood two young men, named Titus and Tiberius. But they were no ordinary turncoats. They were the adult sons of Brutus. Concealing all emotion behind a mask of stoicism, his only thought the preservation of the fledgling republic, Brutus presided over the violent execution of his two sons. And for this, the Roman people saw in him a man worthy of the title Pater Res Publica, or Father of the Republic. And so it was that 407 years later, after banishing his only daughter to the island of Pandateria for disgraceful and lascivious behavior opposed to Rome's rigid morality laws, Caesar Augustus was named Father of the Fatherland. The loss of Julia had devastated Augustus. When he had learned that one of his daughter's friends and co-conspirators, a woman named Phoebe, had taken her own life at the outbreak of the scandal, Augustus cried aloud, "Would that I were Phoebe's father, or had childless died." The Roman people, however, were not in agreement with the severity of the punishment imposed on Augustus's only daughter. They mourned the loss of Julia, whose banishment from Rome now deprived her children of their mother. How was this fair to Gaius and Lucius Caesar, as well as the young Postumus Agrippa and his sisters? "Bring her back," was the demand thrust at Caesar Augustus as he walked the streets of Rome. Displaying effigies of Julia Augusti Filia, the people packed into the Forum Romanum and into the Curia Julia. They took their protest to the highways and byways of Rome, chanting, "Release the merry widow." But Augustus stood his ground. The first man in Rome declared that fire will mix with water sooner than that Julia shall be allowed to return to Rome. Yet the people's demonstrations only intensified. Soon, they were attempting to set afire the Tiber River with lit torches and even flaming garbage. But the sight of glowing torches along the banks of the river only angered him more. An uncompromising Augustus cursed the protesters, saying, "May the gods afflict you with such daughters and wives." Beyond the drama surrounding Julia was the political upheaval that had followed the death of Iulus Antonius in his self-execution, after having been convicted of high treason in association with Julia's traitorous plot. Then, there were the exiles of many of her Cornelian relatives, and also many politicians. But over and above his domestic woes were the foreign ones that fell to the princeps of a mighty Rome and its extended family. Caesar Augustus faced political troubles in the East. Just the year before his daughter had ventured to challenge her father, 2 princes from Judea had arrived in Rome, along with a Greek historian, Nicolaus of Damascus. Herod Antipas and Herod Archelaus, 2 sons of Judea's King Herod the Great, had rushed to Rome, each clutching in his hands a version of his father's last will and testament. King Herod had died in the city of Jericho the year before, from a putrefying illness of such excruciating agony that it became known as Herod's evil. So great was his pain that King Herod was said to have lost his mind, attempting to stab himself, though he was prevented from doing so by one of his cousins. After the king's death, Herod Archelaus, his son by his 4th wife, ascended Judea's golden throne, dressed in white. But his younger brother, Antipas, who had been deposed in their father's most recent will, which had been written just weeks before his death, refuted his brother's claim to the throne. During the ensuing violence, which resulted in the deaths of 3,000 Judeans in the temple during the Passover, both brothers set sail for Rome, and for the adjudication of Caesar Augustus. Herod Antipas accused his older brother of feigning grief over the death of their father, weeping by day and partying by night. He furthermore accused him of taking advantage of their father's addled mind in order to have himself named as heir, and reprimanded him for ascending the throne before the title had been properly given him by Caesar Augustus. Antipas concluded that the deaths of the 3,000, resulting from the conflict, made his older brother not just a threat to the people of Judea, but to Caesar Augustus himself. However, Nicolaus of Damascus, former tutor to the children of Cleopatra, and close friend and confidant of King Herod for many years, told a different story. Nicolaus's brother, Ptolemy, was keeper of the seal for King Herod, and had witnessed and stamped the latest change to the king's last will and testament. Nicolaus, therefore, argued that Herod Archelaus had acted fairly in assuming his father's throne. Nicolaus maintained that the will held by Herod Archelaus, only recently revised in his favor, proved the late king to have been in his right mind, simply by virtue of the fact that the dying king had delegated the final decision to Caesar Augustus. But, should Augustus have any doubts as to his father's choice for succession, Herod Archelaus came to Rome armed with a handsome bequest for Caesar, which amounted to tens of millions of sesterces, kept under heavy guard in Syria Palestina, including his grandson and heir, Gaius Caesar. In the adjudication process, Caesar Augustus made his ruling. In accordance with King Herod's most recent will, as witnessed by the keeper of the seal, Augustus officially named Herod Archelaus Tetrarch of Judea, Samaria, and Idumea, an area encompassing half the overall kingdom ruled by his late father. The other half was divided between Herod Antipas and Herod Philip, a son of King Herod born to another wife. Antipas was made Tetrarch of Galilee and Perea, while Philip was given the Tetrarchy of Iturea and Trachonitis. Upon hearing the decision, Herod Archelaus fell at the feet of Caesar Augustus, who bade him rise, calling him a son worthy to succeed his father. But in Judea, the tens of millions of sesterces meant as a gift for Caesar Augustus, and guarded by a cohort of Roman soldiers, drew the ire of the people. They saw only the Roman occupation of one of their cities, and rose up in violence. The troubles around Palestina soon reached the ears of the Roman governor of Syria, Quintilius Varus, the man who had stepped in to replace Tiberius, when the latter had forsaken his post, to retire to the island of Rhodes. Varus marched his forces into Judea, where he ordered the crucifixion of 2,000 Judeans. Although the actions of Varus brought an end to the hostilities around Palestina, they also deepened the anti-Roman resentment that was now brewing within the hearts of the Judean people. And in Parthia, Augustus had yet more trouble. An aging King Phraates IV had invaded Armenia. The East had become a hotbed of activity and required Rome's attention. But an aging Caesar Augustus was now 60 years old and not up to the rigors of a military campaign so far from home. He needed someone in the East in whom he had absolute trust. With Tiberius gone, Augustus turned to his grandson and heir, Gaius Caesar. Building a network of advisors around the 17-year-old Gaius, which included Marcus Lollius, Publius Quirinius, and Aelius Sejanus, Caesar Augustus granted Gaius Caesar the authority to speak and act on his behalf in the eastern provinces. To fill the void back home that the absence of Gaius would create, Caesar Augustus formally brought his second heir, Lucius Caesar, into the Forum Romanum. There, the father of the Fatherland staged a public ceremony, enrolling him as a citizen. Like Gaius before him, Lucius, upon assuming the toga of manhood, was named Princeps Juventutis, or Prince of Youth. Moreover, Lucius was formally elected consul designatus, with the taking of his consular office postponed until he would reach the age of 19. And where Gaius had been appointed a priest in the College of Pontiffs, Lucius was ordained a priest in the College of Augurs. To celebrate and mark the occasion of Lucius's ascent to manhood, Caesar Augustus gifted to every Roman man the sum of 60 denarii. Both Gaius and Lucius were also endowed with the authority to consecrate buildings, a power which they exercised just before Gaius left for the east. There was a temple around which Caesar Augustus's new Forum Romanum was constructed. The two heirs now joined in oversight of the celebrations, dedicating the temple to the god Mars altar. With the god of war properly invoked, Caesar Augustus bid farewell to his heir. Along with his new wife Livilla, and a retinue of accomplished advisors that had been handpicked by his grandfather, Gaius Caesar said goodbye to Rome and set out for the east.